Trump responds to Iranian Supreme Leader's warning. The Supreme Leader of Iran just drew a line. And what happened next has people around the world asking the same question. He posted it publicly for everyone to see. A warning that if the United States attacks Iran, this time it will be a regional war. Not a skirmish, not a contained strike, a regional war. And he made it clear. Washington would bear the responsibility. Now, in any other administration, that kind of language might trigger emergency meetings, diplomatic scrambles, and carefully worded responses designed to de-escalate. But this isn't any other administration. And the man sitting in the Oval Office isn't known for backing down. When reporters asked President Trump about the Supreme Leader's warning, his response was almost unsettling in its calm. Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that. But we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there. Very close. Couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right. Right now, the United States and Iran are reportedly preparing for talks in Turkey. This is being framed as the last diplomatic window, a final attempt to ease tensions before something irreversible happens. Mediators from Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt are involved. The goal, at least on paper, is to find a path toward de-escalation. But here's what most people don't know. And this is something that will become haunting when we look at the biblical pattern of false peace. These talks aren't happening in a vacuum. They're happening in the shadow of what already took place. In June of 2025, there was a 12-day war. You may have heard it referenced. You may have seen the footage. But what you might not fully grasp is how decisively that conflict ended, and what Iran lost. Operation Midnight Hammer. That was the name of the U.S. strikes that targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. Natanz, Fordow, Isfahan, sites that had been built deep underground, hardened against attack, protected by every defense Iran could muster. And in less than 2 weeks, significant portions of that infrastructure were destroyed. Intelligence assessments suggested Iran's nuclear program was set back by years, not months, years. And for a brief moment, it looked like the threat had been neutralized. But here's the problem. And this is where the current tension becomes impossible to ignore. Iran is rebuilding. The breakout time, that's the amount of time it would take Iran to produce enough enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon, is shrinking. We're no longer talking about a distant threat. We're talking about something that could become reality in weeks. And the United States knows this. Israel knows this, which is why the biggest, most powerful ships in the world are now positioned within striking distance. But here's what makes this moment different from every other Middle East standoff. And this connects directly to why Trump's response was so calculated. This isn't just military pressure. This is a very specific kind of strategic positioning. Trump has established a pattern. He doesn't negotiate from weakness. He negotiates from demonstrated strength. Midnight Hammer wasn't just a strike. It was a statement. It said, "We're not bluffing. We're not waiting. And if you push us, we'll act." Now Iran is at a crossroads. They can come to the table in Turkey and make real concessions, particularly on the nuclear file. Or they can stall, rebuild, and hope the pressure fades. But here's what the Supreme Leader's warning tells us, and this is something most analysts are glossing over. Iran isn't just talking to Washington. They're talking to the region. When you say regional war, you're not warning America. You're signaling to allies. But here's what most people miss, and this is going to become absolutely crucial when we look at what Scripture actually says about how the last days unfold. This isn't about one war. This is about how escalation happens. And the Bible has a lot to say about that, more than most Christians realize. If all you're doing is watching the news, you're only seeing half the picture. The other half, the half that explains why these patterns keep repeating, is found in Scripture. And what Jesus said about moments like this one is something every believer needs to understand. Let me read you something, and I want you to hear it fresh. Matthew 24:6-8 says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains." Now, here's what most people miss. And this is something that will completely reshape how you understand what's happening between the U.S. and Iran. Jesus didn't say, "When war breaks out, the end is here." He said you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, threats, warnings, posturing, escalation language, exactly what we're seeing right now. And his instruction wasn't to panic. It was to watch and to understand that these things are part of a process. That word, beginning, is crucial. The beginning of birth pains, not the end. The beginning. Birth pains don't announce the delivery. They signal that the body is moving toward something. They start slow. They build. They intensify. And at some point, there's no stopping what's coming. But here's the part that most prophecy teachers skip over. And this is where it gets personal. Jesus said, "See to it that you are not alarmed." That's a command. It's not a suggestion. It's not optional comfort for people who can't handle the news. It's a direct instruction from the mouth of Christ. Don't let this destabilize you. Why? Because these things must happen. They're part of the pattern. They're not signs that God has lost control. They're signs that history is moving exactly where He said it would. And that means our job isn't to track dates. Our job is to track patterns. And the pattern Jesus described? Wars, rumors of wars, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. That pattern is accelerating. The Trump-Iran exchange isn't the fulfillment of prophecy, but it fits the pattern Jesus told us to watch for. But here's what makes this even more urgent. And this connects directly to a specific prophecy that names Iran by its ancient name. Because what Ezekiel wrote about Persia isn't vague, it's detailed, and it's coming. This is where we need to be very careful and very precise, because there's a prophecy in the book of Ezekiel that mentions Persia by name, and Persia is the ancient name for modern-day Iran. And that means whatever Ezekiel saw in his vision includes the nation that just threatened regional war. But here's what I need you to understand. And this is something that will become absolutely vital as we continue. Being named in prophecy doesn't mean fulfillment is happening right now. It means Iran has a role to play, but the timing of that role matters enormously. Ezekiel 38 describes a future coalition, a group of nations that will come together against Israel. Persia is listed among them, alongside nations from the north, from Africa, and from regions that today include Turkey and parts of Central Asia. It's a massive, coordinated invasion. And when it happens, God Himself intervenes. Supernatural destruction, divine judgment, a moment so decisive that the nations will know that the Lord is God. But here's the critical question. Is that what we're seeing now? And the honest answer is no, not yet. Let me explain why. And this is important, because too many prophecy teachers jump straight from headlines to Ezekiel without examining whether the conditions actually match. First, there is no unified northern coalition right now. Yes, there are alliances. Yes, Russia and Iran cooperate. Yes, Turkey has complex relationships with both. But the kind of coordinated multi-nation invasion Ezekiel describes hasn't formed. And third, and this one is crucial, Ezekiel describes Israel as dwelling securely when the invasion comes. That Hebrew word, betach, implies a sense of safety, confidence, lack of walls. And while Israel today is strong, they are not dwelling securely in the way Ezekiel describes. They're on constant alert. Their borders are militarized. Their enemies are active. The condition hasn't been met. So what does that mean for what we're watching now? It means this is stage setting, not fulfillment. The pieces are moving into position. The players are being identified. The alliances are forming. But the final act hasn't begun. And here's what makes that distinction so important. And this connects directly to how Trump's response fits into the larger biblical pattern. If we mistake stage setting for fulfillment, we either panic prematurely or we become desensitized when the real moment arrives. Neither response is what Jesus commanded. He said, watch, not predict. Recognize, not speculate. So let's look at Trump's response through that lens. Because what he said, and how he said it, fits a pattern that Scripture describes in unsettling detail. Now, I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. This is not about making Trump a hero or a villain. This isn't about politics. This is about patterns. And the pattern Trump is following, whether he knows it or not, fits a biblical template that has repeated throughout history. Think about how he responded to the Supreme Leader's warning. He didn't escalate emotionally. He didn't fire back with threats of his own. He didn't pound the podium and promise destruction. He was calm, almost dismissive. He acknowledged the warning, reminded everyone of American strength, expressed hope for a deal, and then said 5 words that carried more weight than an entire speech. We'll find out. That's not emotional escalation. That's structural escalation. There's a difference. Emotional escalation is reactive. It's driven by anger, pride, or fear. Structural escalation is calculated. It increases pressure while maintaining control. It says, I'm not panicking, but I'm not backing down either. And here's why that matters prophetically. And this is something that will become devastating when we reach what Paul wrote about peace and safety. The Bible describes a pattern where tension builds, pressure increases, and then, right before destruction, there's a moment of false calm. Not resolution, the appearance of resolution. And that appearance is more dangerous than the tension itself. 1 Thessalonians 5:3 says, while people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. Did you catch that? Destruction doesn't come during the chaos. It comes after the world exhales. It comes when people think the crisis has been averted. It comes when the deal is signed, the ships go home, and the headlines move on. Trump's approach, strength plus delay plus pressure, creates controlled tension. And controlled tension often leads to one of 2 outcomes, either genuine resolution or temporary calm that masks deeper instability. And the Bible warns us repeatedly. It's the calm you need to watch for. So when you see talks in Turkey, when you hear diplomats expressing optimism, when the tone shifts from threats to negotiations, don't assume the danger has passed. That's exactly when Scripture says to be most alert. But here's what takes this even deeper. And this is where Revelation enters the picture. Because what John saw about the final escalation isn't just dramatic imagery. It's a template for how restraints are removed and movements begin. This is the part most analysts miss, and it's the part that has the most prophetic significance. When the Supreme Leader warned about a regional war, he wasn't primarily talking to Washington. He was talking to the region. He was talking to his allies. He was talking to the network. Think about how Iran operates. They don't fight alone. They never have. Their entire military strategy is built on proxies. The most dangerous phase isn't the war itself. It's what comes before. It's the moment everyone thinks the danger has passed. I need you to hear this carefully, because it goes against everything our instincts tell us. The most dangerous phase isn't the explosion. It's the silence before it. It's the calm that convinces everyone the storm has passed. It's the headline that says, "Deal reached," while the conditions underneath remain unchanged. The calm isn't resolution. It's a setup. And here's what makes this so relevant to the current moment. And this connects directly to the talks happening in Turkey. If a deal is announced, if tensions appear to ease, if the ships reposition and the headlines move on, don't assume the danger has passed. That might be the most dangerous moment of all. Remember what Paul wrote. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction comes suddenly. The word suddenly is key. It's not gradual. It's not predictable. It catches people off guard precisely because they thought the worst was over. History confirms this pattern. World War I followed a period of unprecedented global trade and diplomatic optimism. World War II followed treaty after treaty designed to prevent it. The pattern repeats. Tension builds, a pause emerges, people relax, and then everything breaks. If you've made it this far, you're not looking for entertainment. You're looking for understanding. And that means you're ready to hear what most videos like this won't tell you. The point of prophecy isn't to predict the end. It's to prepare you for the season. So let me give you a framework. Not for setting dates, but for staying spiritually alert in a world that's moving faster than most people realize. First, watch trajectories, not personalities. It's tempting to get caught up in whether Trump is right, or Khamenei is bluffing, or which leader is the good guy. But prophecy doesn't hinge on personalities. It hinges on patterns. Nations rising against nations, tensions building, alliances forming. These trajectories matter more than any individual player. The stage is being set regardless of who's standing on it. Second, separate political loyalty from spiritual discernment. This is where so many believers get confused. You can support a leader's policies and still recognize that their actions fit into a prophetic pattern. You can oppose a leader's approach and still acknowledge that God is sovereign over the outcome. Political opinions are temporary. Prophetic patterns are eternal. Don't let the first blind you to the second. Third, refuse panic and refuse denial. These are the two traps Jesus warned about. Panic says, the sky is falling, and lives in constant anxiety. Denial says, this will blow over, and goes back to sleep. Both responses are wrong. The biblical response is sober watchfulness. Eyes open, heart steady, faith anchored. Fourth, understand that prophecy unfolds through systems, not just headlines. A single exchange between Trump and the Supreme Leader isn't prophecy fulfilled. But the systems driving that exchange, military positioning, nuclear proliferation, proxy networks, alliance coordination. Those systems are shaping the conditions Scripture describes. Watch the systems. The headlines will follow. And fifth, remember that being a watcher means being a witness. The purpose of understanding the times isn't to win arguments or impress people with your prophetic knowledge. It's to point others toward the one who holds the future. When people see the world destabilizing and ask, "What does this mean?" you should be ready with an answer that leads them to Christ, not just to commentary. That's what it means to be a watcher. Not fearful, not frantic, alert, grounded, ready.